Good morning, Greg, and fair warning to you on this March 14th that we are recording this. I should probably tell you, beware the Ides of March.
That's great.
So,
That's a 24-hour warning because
yes,
technically it's historically been thought of as the
it, it
15th,
it
right?
is right around this
Yeah.
time in general. So that I guess is the topic du jour of what we're talking about. And we'll get to the reason behind all this stuff and how dates, significant dates start to coalesce
Yeah.
during certain periods of the year and what that means, everything from people saying there's some significance to it, some by happenstance. And we'll get into all that, but it's important to understand sort of where this saying came from of beware the
Yeah.
Ides of March and the significance overall. So I'll kind of give a quick background and then we'll kind of start from there if that works. Okay,
That works for
so
me.
first of all, obviously, we're right now middle of spring. We're recording this on March 14th, or spring is about to start. The spring solstice is about is coming up. But spring is that kind of renewal, growth, season of change, huge historical significance throughout human history. It's a fundamental changing the seasons, and you can go into all types of different reasons why. There's agricultural cycles. So ancient societies, spring was the beginning of the agricultural cycle. So the days started to get a little bit longer, so you could start to plant and grow crops for the year. There's huge religious and cultural celebrations, not just Christianity with Easter, but and Jewish with Passover and several others, and even religions that predate those or aren't in existence anymore. There's always huge spring sort of celebrations. Then with astronomy and even what people then past would call astrology, right? The spring equinox happening here in a few days. I think I said solstice. I meant equinox. Sorry, but this is the northern
That's good.
hemisphere.
For those of you taking notes.
Yeah, whatever. It's early. I woke up at 2 a.m. this morning. So, so
Beware.
big, yeah, astronomical and astrological, if that's your saying, significance, and then historical events. All kinds of ancient wars started. His Persian Wars in ancient Greece, American Revolutionary War, the Arab Spring, all of these different, events sort of influenced by the change of the seasons. And so to get to the Ides of March, well, the Ides was, literally part of the ancient Roman calendar indicating the middle of the month. So the Ides was always the middle of any month. And then depending on, how long that month was, it fit in right around there, somewhere the 13th or 15th day of the month. But the Ides of March, which would fall on March 15th, which would be tomorrow, as we're from when we're recording this, was an especially important date in the Roman calendar. It marked the first full moon of the year and was traditionally associated with the settling of debts, right? And obviously the springtime and the harvest, everything I just talked about. But in the context of Shakespeare's play of Julius Caesar, right, the phrase beware the Ides of March sort of has this sinister connotation because it was used to warn, someone warned Julius Caesar of his impending assassination and told him beware the Ides of March. And he of course, chose to ignore that, right, and found out what happened. But since Shakespeare used that, it's sort of been used in film, literature, all kinds of stuff since then to convey some sort of sense of impending danger or misfortune, and has this bigger kind of significance of this like cautionary tale of, I would say, overconfidence and complacency, maybe, right? So that's
Yeah.
sort of the historical thing where it comes from. So, going back from starting with the Ides of March, this is a little bit behind it. So I just wanted to give a little bit of the background of that because what's happened now is people start to say, well, there's an increase in attacks or significant events in March. This is throughout history of what we've seen, which is technically not true, but I also get why people say that, right? So I'll kind of want to start there, Greg, and I'll let throw to you before I go any farther of how we want to discuss, I guess, everything I brought up and what we're going to talk about today, and
So
why people do this. Why do we go, okay, beware the Ides of March, Greg? What does that mean in today's terms, I guess?
here's the thing. Not a lot of our listeners or viewers, Brian, know that you're a cosmetologist. So that was great that
Is
you were
that
able to.
cosm today? Is that what I think I meant
No,
to
no,
say astrology?
I'm
Oh,
just
okay.
I'm just messing with you because it's been an early day and meth is a hell of a drug.
It is.
So you went over so much just then that I've got a third of a page of notes and I want to go unorthodox.
Okay.
This is why. because I want people to listen to the words that are coming out of your head so they can understand what significance March truly has in the Ides. So let's go to Finland. So Finland, a lot of the food, and especially the baked goods that they eat, are made with different rye and other grains because they have shorter, colder, wetter season. Yep. Okay, so just because you look at your calendar and think, oh, this is the beginning of my growing season,
yeah,
I would say go to 1,000 years after the death of Jesus Christ, the first reference of the Hindu Kush, which literally means the Hindu killer. So between
Hindu death,
Pakistan
right?
and China, and and so why? Because anybody that was trying to come in and out of Afghanistan, or in and out of Pakistan, or in and out of China through the Kush, depending on the season, they died en masse. That was a great killer. It was wicked hot in the summer, and it was wicked cold in the winter. So it named a thing, right? So we knew to beware, just like you would say, beware the Ides of March. There's some guy in India that was telling another guy with a mule and his wife, hey, if you're going through the Kush, be careful because it's the killer. So a couple of nights ago on Turner Classic, Brian, there was Pacino and Dog Day Afternoon. That is like they shoot horses, don't they? I'm a film buff, but I hate that film.
Yeah.
But there's something very important about it. We call the dog days of summer the hottest, most unbearable days of summer. So where's it come from? It comes from one Canis Major, the big dog, the star in the sky, and Sirius, the little dog, come in the same thing. And that's normally during July and the first part of August when it's the hottest. So we have a history of humans of looking at stuff and naming it and equating it with something else, whether it fits or not. And once that's stuck, Brian, it's hard to unstick. That's what I want to say.
It is. And no, you went to the cosmology there.
Exactly.
I'm going to keep using that word, but no, that was the
great.
Aries and Taurus during that type of year too.
Yes.
And so they start to name things. Now, here's why I said there sometimes is significance, even though it doesn't really correlate to something over time, as you know, they're more likely to have something in March. The idea is, like you just brought it up, the Hindu Kush up in the mountains in between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Well, when does the fighting season start? Well, it starts in spring when the when the snow thaws. That's when it picks up, and they harbor up during the winter because it's hard to move around, it's hard to stay warm, it's hard to get supplies. So you have to. It's just the way of life in that area. And but that's all humans in a sense are like that. We're wired that. What do? We fatten up during the winter, right? To survive, we have to gather up what we need to make it through. And then when that spring comes, man, that's that rebirth. Hey, we made it. We lived. Some people might not have lived, right? And we did. So one, we have to celebrate that, and so that's where all these different traditions come from. And then it's literally significance. The weather changes. We can get out more. We can start to plant. We have to start prepare for the year. And it's almost it's actually typically the new year. So spring was always the new year. It wasn't January 1st, the middle of winter, some random time because of Pope Gregory and the Jesuits making the Gregorian calendar, which is well, it's the most accurate calendar we have. So, but it was always in the spring time frame because why? Because of that. Because that was the new year. We made it through the death of the winter, and now we're going to survive, hopefully, another year.
So we look at Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, and we say that the rat that comes out of the hole, if it sees its shadow, right? So, and then we have the time change that we refer to as spring forward, and everybody's, oh well, it's associated with what? Well, generally the first day of spring, right around there, it's very close, and that's why the Ides of March. And you're exactly right. That's when I pay back a debt. Why it's significant to Caesar, because the debt was being paid, right?
Yeah.
But that's that 14th to 16th, and generally, what's the middle of 14 and 16? 15, and most months are about 30 days, right?
Yeah.
So that matches. So when we take a look at something like the term spring fever, there's a term that's right next to it that's called cabin fever.
Yeah.
Now as a copper in the windswept streets of Metro Detroit, when you had a thing called lake effect snow.
Oh yeah, we had that in Chicago.
People were out there and they had a shovel. You know what I'm talking about. They had to shovel their parking space and put their folding chair out there, so everybody knew that I shoveled that space for me.
You do not park there.
Homicides that you would not believe Why? Because spring fever hit, and cabin fever meant that I was in the house too long. And the great thing about them is both of them are psychologically based and physiologically based. It's based on your serotonin levels. It's based on your sleep cycles. So when you take a look at your mental calendar, when you have better sun and you have better temperatures, you're in a better mood, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
You sleep better, you eat better, you have a wider variety of food than you do during the winter, and you're generally more amiable. When you don't, then the neighbor, you remember the video, the horrible video that I
Oh,
hate to
yeah.
look at and watch, where shoveling snow and a little bit of meat mouthing turns into a homicide suicide, and three
Yeah.
people are dead 5 minutes later.
It was in Pennsylvania.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just a couple of
but
years
think
ago.
about that for a minute. Okay, what happens is all of those things that you would have taken lightly if you were in Barbados,
Yeah.
that you wouldn't have worried
You're on
about
the,
if it
yeah.
was 75 and you're
Yeah.
having a lemonade, and your neighbor chunks a bone from their dog with their lawnmower, and it goes through your picture window. Okay, if that was a snowblower, right? And a
Yeah.
month earlier, you'd be hacking them to death with a machete. And
Yeah.
people go, yeah, but is that really based in psychology and physiology? Yeah, where have
Yeah.
you been? Where have you been? Exactly, you know?
It,
So what we have to understand that sometimes there's a root like Punxsutawney Phil that isn't historically accurate, but it's historically significant. Then there's other things which are historically, physiologically, psychologically, sociologically accurate and significant as well. That's why, you know, when I was building it, I still go back to some of the Marine leaders that didn't understand me back in the day. And when I came up with the combat rule of threes, and it was three with an apostrophe S, and they go, you can't apostrophize threes.
wait, if
I
it's
go, well,
three,
I've been doing it for
it's already
my
multiple,
entire
right?
life. Exactly.
Yeah.
But the idea is that threes matter. And so the combat rule, and they go, so you mean the combat
Well, it's
rule of
not just
three?
one
And I
three.
would go, no,
It's
it's groups
several.
of
Yeah,
threes.
yeah, I
Yeah.
got you.
So still to this day, that's a gating mechanism. If you don't understand that part of it, like I was on LinkedIn the other day, and some guy is a combat hunter instructor trainer. How can you be? I know all of them. I've never heard of you. Well, I would call that guy and ask him about the combat rule of threes. Why? Because, Brian, if you pick three things that come together in that time frame, the longer shadows, the cloudier sky,
Mm-hmm.
and these rodents coming out of their burrows to look for food, what do you got? You got the story of Punxsutawney Phil. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? The most famous groundhog in the world, and people center their lives around that stuff. It's a, you said it earlier with the pagan celebrations and Christmas and
Yeah.
the holidays. What happens is we marry ourselves to a date. Now, why do we find, therefore, it to be surprising? Like I think it's without referring to the calendar or anything. I think it's like the 31st. It's the end, near the end of March when Reagan got shot. It's also the last quarter when Bush launched the invasion against Saddam.
Yeah.
Why is that significant? Because let's put the foot on the other shoe. Let's wear a sandal for a minute, and let's think about that day. What was that day? That's the day of shock and awe when hell reigned. You get what I'm trying to say? And then I remembered that years ago during that period, an American president was almost killed by just a man on the street. And what did that turn into, Brian? Now I'm looking at my mud hut and I'm going, hey, fuck, I could take on America. Do you understand how that coalesces?
Yeah.
What happened is it simply turns into this thing. And then every year when the grandfather is sitting down with the grandkids and all of a sudden those days are getting longer, right? What's he saying? Well, now you can't go to bed because it's still daylight. And you know what happened 27 years ago on this day? And it becomes that significant event. We have to understand that sometimes we co-opt an event, or a date rather, and sometimes the date co-ops
us.
right?
Absolutely. And that's with I you know, I always talk about it too. It's not kind of a little off topic, but with historical sayings or quotes
Yeah,
or something where it gets, I call it kind of like hijacked by history, where you
that's
know
so true.
it gets taken to a completely different direction or under a different meaning, and you don't always know that meaning. It's funny because on this one I always see people quote that, what's that fucking, it's that poem that the guy who wrote it was a one-hit wonder. It was I'm the captain of my soul, the master of my soul, captain my fate, captain my soul, fate, fucking whatever. It's really early in the morning, but
Yeah,
you know what I'm talking about. I hate it because everyone loves that. It's Invictus, and everyone's like, oh, I was like, and ask anyone.
who loved Invictus?
Well,
Who?
that's what I'm
It
saying
has two
is,
sides, buddy.
yeah. So
Yeah,
so here's the thing. Everyone loves that, and I always ask them who wrote it, and no one ever knows because the
right,
person who wrote it was like it was literally a one-hit wonder.
right.
But everyone likes using that term. But that was Tim McVeigh. Tim McVeigh recited that poem before he was executed, and then said 167 to 1, like come get some. But yeah, so
Exactly.
that stuff gets hijacked by history, and so what we start to do is, like you said, we go, well, this is a significant area, and it is, and
Yep.
here's why I think that time is significant. It's a transition period. And it's a transition period
Right.
from winter to spring, like from coming out of the cave out to starting that sort of next year. And what we talk about, transition periods are always, there's uncertainty, there's anxiety, right? So
Of course there is.
so that's the to me, that's the underlying so what I get, or not just so what, but that's the underlying cause of this, the way we think about this, the psychological and sociological reactions to it. Because I don't know. Well, we're coming out of the cave, and and we all
Exactly.
know, like, the sun's coming out. It's like that. I remember, I'm sure you had the same thing when you were a kid, and like it's that first day, maybe in March, where it's sunny out and like 50 degrees, but there's still snow on
Yep.
the ground. And
Yep.
you're all out there, you're wearing shorts, a t-shirt, and you're having
Exactly.
snowball fights because it's the coolest thing ever. And you think, oh my God, it's so warm out. And it's literally just barely above 50 degrees, but the
So
sun is out and you feel that. Those transition times are significant.
you're talking about something that everybody has noticed. They just haven't looked at it the right way. So let me polish their lens for just a second. Have you seen early in the spring when there is still snow on the ground and it's that 50-degree day
Yeah.
and the kids lined up to school aren't wearing their coats
Yeah.
and they're wearing their shorts and they're
Yeah.
freezing to death, but they're rocking back and forth? Why? Because I have to show off my spring body because I'm getting ready in a few years to, try to populate the species. And so, you're trying to look good and I'm trying to look good for each other. And the bus stop just happens to be our bar or our
Yeah.
church for
Yeah.
that day. So what does that mean? Well, let's go back to Invictus, which is great. You finally got that one. That was that was the final question on your cosmology degree.
Yeah.
And I would talk to McVeigh because McVeigh's a good guy to think about because McVeigh was a thinker. He is an animal. He's a
Yeah.
monster, but he was a thinker. So
He
when
was
he's
a
arrested,
self-starter. He was
yeah, yeah, he
he
was
was
a
when,
bootstrapper,
when they talk about, people who made it on their own, that's him.
resilient.
Yep,
That's him.
absolutely.
So when he's arrested, he's wearing a shirt that says "Six Emperor Tyrants" and's got a picture of Lincoln on it. Okay, it's also got a picture of John Wilkes Booth on it, and it's a wanted poster. Why is that significant? Well, if we think of Six Emperor Tyrants, that's been around the term for thousands of years, and most of us associate it with the play Julius Caesar by Shakespeare, Brian, but it's been around forever. It was in Homer's Odyssey. It's just a term that people would shake their fist at and use for government
Right.
overreach. And so what is it? Thus always the tyrants. So don't push me around. You can't hold me down. I'm sure during the Boston Massacre, which happened in March, by the way,
Yeah.
somebody yelled "Six Emperor Tyrannus." Do you get what I'm trying to say? No taxation without representation. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's a theme, right? So
Yeah.
now we take a look at that and we say, okay, well, why was it significant that he had, that photo on there? Well, Lincoln was killed by John Wilkes Booth in Ford's Theater during the play My American Cousin, right? Shoots him, dies later,
Yeah.
jumps off the stage, yells it out. What's John Wilkes Booth's father's name? Junius Brutus Booth, and they're all actors. And it's Junius Brutus Booth because
Yeah.
early in their career, they said, you remember that play by Julius Caesar, you
That
thespian, you? That's how you say, thus always the tyrants. You kill them. That's how you pay them back on the Ides of March. Look at that string. Now, I just played that string backwards, but do you think that was significant enough to those families that they were willing to die for that? Do you think when Invictus was written
yeah.
that guy played that forward in his mind? Now, he was writing about a lost girl or a broken dream or something that happened in his own life. He wasn't thinking about the world in its condition at that time, but McVeigh was. But you got to think about Brutus was when Caesar allegedly looks at Brutus and goes, "You too, Brutus? You're one of these guys?"
Yeah.
Brutus had a long, rich history of killing people.
He did.
And he had a long, rich history of saying, "This is fucked. I'm going to fight you over it." So that it happened in the Senate, and that Brutus was part of the cabal. That's no surprise to anybody. But we want to take, when we co-opt history and history doesn't hijack us. By the way, great episode title. What happens is that we get caught up in the moment and we start using confirmation bias to make the story fit what we want to preach.
Yes.
So we can't have a rough edge. So we sand down the edge with time. You get what I'm trying to say? And now all of a sudden Invictus is written for me. Now all of a sudden the groundhog was the one that, old Josiah saw when he was coming out of the John Deere plant. And none of that shit's true, but it's still significant.
And so it's almost, these are significant dates for some people, which in certain situations may cause it. Like, we do take into account significant dates because they mean something to people, but at the same time, I can't then extrapolate that data set or that one piece of information, that one area of significance across a population, right? Or it's almost like the what's the one? Oh, it must be a full moon tonight. It's like, okay, there's
lunacy. Okay.
Yeah,
so
well,
or
my wife does that.
Where does it come from?
I don't know if I should. Yeah, she doesn't listen to the show. Which she just, oh my God, Mercury must be in retrograde. Everyone's acting crazy, and it drives me nuts when she says shit like that, because I'm like, that you're attributing significance to a series of events that have nothing to do with one another.
Yes,
I understand why you would think that way, but you're starting to grasp at these things. So that's the thing. Even going back to astrology, which is, it's astrology. So sorry to bash anyone here who's into astrology, but when that was the original science of what became astronomy, right? So meaning there was people who were originally looking at the stars for significance and the way to hand down stories and explain things over time. So it had significance. Now that doesn't mean you go get your fucking palm read and that lady knows what you're talking about. But 2,000 years ago, that was the best that they had.
Okay, so you're making me read a book that I'm halfway through about Everybody Lies. And it's not about everybody lying. What it's about is it's about data.
Yeah.
And the bigger the data set, the better. Yeah. And I read it because I like you and I want to know what you're reading. In Mad Magazine, that's what I'm reading. And Brian never reads it and it makes me mad. But when I look at the theme, I would call your attention to me laying on my back and looking up at the stars and saying, well, there's Orion's belt and here are the Archer's bow and all that other stuff. Look, what happens is the sky is too vast for me to understand. So I pick a smaller data set within that large data set and I claim it. And I don't claim it thinking about where you are in the world. I claim it from where I am. So if I'm in the southern hemisphere and you're 6,000 miles away on the other side of the equator, west of me, for example, it wouldn't have the same significance. But there's certain things associated with those dates that are bigger than both of us, no matter that 6,000 mile distance, because of the big data set in the sky, right? So what happens is now when I build my form of pyramid, that's kind of a pyramid like you. It's stacked rocks, right?
Yeah.
Yours is more pointed. Mine is more layered.
Yeah.
Okay. When you line it up, it goes north, south, east, and west. And you're going, wow, that's significant. And then all of a sudden you go, well, if you look through that hole at the top, when the moon is in that hole, it's time to plant, right? And when the moon is in that other hole, it's time to reap what you sowed, or it's going to go fallow. It's going to go bad. And you're going, holy shit. So there's got to be a UFO because everybody on Earth saw the significance. So do you see what I'm talking about? What happens is that we have a smaller data set, which we can draw reasonable conclusions. When compared against a big data set, things fall out of it and they're right or wrong. And we learn over time from that, right? But the geographics and the astrology, which became the astronomy gave us a good start on when to plant and when to harvest, when to get married, when to have kids. Because if you had a kid during the wrong month, which doesn't matter much now, but if you're in Senegal, you get what I'm trying to say, it might matter a lot. Back to my Finland story about the wheat harvest versus the rye. Okay, you have to understand what your role is in the world, in the time, in the place. So sociologically, you might have an imperative. But Brian, if you have the kid in the wrong month and you're all of a sudden somewhere out in the back of the Yukon and you don't have the type of milk or fat or warmth or fire source or something like that, the kid might have a deficit, or the kid might die. So everything happens for a reason. And I'll sum it up by this: being an investigator my entire life, and you are as well. That's what we get along so well. Shelley is, Sean, William Atkinson, a couple of people that we really absolutely love. Jim Chouinard is a perfect one. Rocky Mastretta. I could go on and on. Those people that we love the most are lifelong learners, and they're investigators. So when you see somebody clubbing somebody like a harp seal and there's a homicide, you have to stop and say not what the motive is, but you have to stop and say, okay, I saw the demonstration of intent. Where did that foment? Where did that truly start? Okay, and now you talk about, like, for example, March is another date significant to the Nazi Party. Those that are still around and those that call themselves Nazis, because it was invasion of Austria. Okay, so not a shot was fired, invasion of Austria. Significant from your point of view, because there was too much snow to go over the Alps to go in and take Zurich. You get what I'm trying to say? Okay, but it's also significant that was a beginning of a push, right?
Yes.
And so now those dates, just like in America, we talk about Pearl Harbor. There's other countries in the world that don't give a shit about Pearl Harbor because it never impacted them and they didn't lose a soul. That's what we have to balance, Brian. So an investigator and a learner doesn't just look at the date. They go, before I go to work today, were there any significant events that happen on this date that I can co-opt? Can I use them to my advantage and say, hey, thank God for all you women out there, because it's National History Month for women. Okay. Or you say, hey, today was the biggest airline disaster in history, and I'm going to the airport. Probably not the time to, joke about the small seating on a plane. Do you see what I'm trying to say? How you could use life to its fullest by just understanding some of the stuff that keeps us going every day, through dates, through times, through seasons.
No, and you brought the historical, understanding the historical significance of something using intent versus motive. I mean, you brought it up with the whole. I love watching Ancient Aliens on History Channel. It's hysterical, and I fall asleep to it. And I like the one guy with the crazy hair. But the whole point is we're looking through it from that perspective. So you just gave a simple explanation where they said, okay, the intent is I need to measure things so I know and pass down to the next generation when we plant the food, when we harvest the food, when this is going to happen. So I have to measure that, because that's my whole entire life, my whole entire world. And you know what? I can see the moon. I can see the moon and I can measure where that's at in the sky over time. That's very simple, right? So let's develop a lunar calendar that tells us this stuff. And then, but because we have a different way of doing it now, and because we have our technology seeing it through our perspective, we go, oh my gosh, they built this. This is incredible. Why would they do that? What is the point? You know what? The aliens came down because they need a landing pod to control. So it's like, wait, what? Like, hang on. Like, it's usually the simplest explanation. And then what happened to humans? Someone came along then and said, hey, wait, the lunar one isn't as good as, you know what? I don't think the Earth is the center of the universe here. I think it might be the sun. You know what I mean? And then our measurements got different.
Had to happen.
And so that will evolve over time. And now maybe we're in a multiverse and there's something at the center and our universe is on the out. And maybe 1,000 years from now, someone will crack the code on that. But today we have what we have. And so
you're spot on. And let me throw in Al Gore. Let me throw Al Gore under the bus. Al Gore, who was roommates with Lee Jones, what's his name? The actor,
Tommy Lee Jones. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
So they were roommates. But every Al Gore theory and projection about what was going to happen and when went the wayside, just like Greta Thunberg's "the world is going to end," in 2023. Why? Just like the Mayan calendar, Brian, we're looking at too small a data set. So when we take a look at weather and we take a look at the Earth, we have to understand it's been around for a good long time. So if we only took the stock market from last Tuesday till today, or we took the stock market from 100 years ago till today, we're going to get different calculus. We're going to see a different trend emerge. And that's my second caution. My second caution, other than being a lifelong learner and lifelong investigator, there's always something there, is don't put all your eggs in one basket, because, again, you're thinking that it's this because this has happened. I would say expand your data set And don't just look locally, look globally, because there's probably a precedent that's been set somewhere, or a theorem, or somebody tried a hypothesis, and you need to know about it. And if
Yeah.
all you're doing is going to Wikipedia for your research, you're never going to hear of it, and you're never going to understand it. And there's times that we've been in the room where somebody was talking about something like Steve Drum. We're going to have him as a guest, and the first couple of pages of Drum's book, he talks about Left of Bang, not the book Left of Bang. He talks about the theory of the mindset.
Yeah.
Okay, so every time I read that, I grin, because we've got, we knew the bet that was coming in. We were Martha Stewart. We had insider information on that, and that feels good. So I would tell everybody that's out there, don't just go blindly into it and read what's that road sign? What's a big thing that they have on a highway that you look at and it tells you the truth? The billboard. Okay. The billboard. And back in the day, what was it? It was the barn with Burma shave.
Yeah.
And back in the day before that, it was Pompeii. The wine sucks, etching it into the side of the building. That's always been out there, Brian, but that's one person's opinion. What I would say, you need to back off the gas a little bit, pump the brake and take a look around and go, what's the rest of the world saying about this event? What really is here?
Well, that's almost back to the sort of meaning behind Beware the Ides of March, about warning against overconfidence, right? I mean, that actually ties into sort of what this saying has become and grown to, but that has nothing to do with this time of year as it is with anything, right? You want to warn against complacency and overconfidence. Those two, you got to balance those things out, where you can't just be sitting on your ass thinking everything's fine, but you can't just be so confident in what you're doing. You know what I mean? That you're so sure of yourself. It's always that balance, that the MLMD COA, right? It's
exactly
what is it that
that's
where
these things come from. We didn't make this shit up. It's been around forever. We just happen to be the first to name it, first to point it and go, that might be more important than something else. But we weren't the first to name it, because that's why we're called Arcadia Cognerati. Okay, I call it MD COA, so a lot of other people do, but COA was always around. I just added the ML and the MD because it made more sense in my brain. People adopted that. But guess who else talked about that? We're back to the ancient Greeks that used a different word, but they meant the exact same thing. So the ancient Greeks held up a cat and looked at the shade on the cat rather than the groundhog, because they didn't have a damn groundhog. That's what I'm talking about. You have to take a look at the wisdom behind it, right? And not to bag on our Stoics again, but the idea is that if you're looking at somebody else's quote and you're adopting it and saying, that's what I'm going to base the rest of my life on, you can't. What you got to do is you got to say, what's your quote? What's your dojo insignia? What's your Brian Doe karate that you're going to attack the world with? And that's life right there. That's figuring out that's life from everybody that's gone before.
Take everything that you've learned and figure out how it works best for you, not what's the best one thing to do for you. It's going to be a mix of everything, and I think that's sort of part of what we're talking about, because that allows you to face the uncertainty and anxiety of a transition period that we're in literally for the seasons right now. I mean, that's why there's that unsettling feeling sometimes. That's why when fall comes in and you get that little chill and the air changes a little bit and you feel that, you don't just feel that as a temperature, like you feel that in your body. You feel that at a DNA level going, the weather's changing, storms are coming, winter's here. Like, we need to be prepared. That's a feeling that you don't have to get
to your spine.
But it's ingrained in your DNA in a sense. Now, some people are more attuned to that than others, but it's inside you, and so that's kind of what we think. And it goes back to even what you said again. I bring it up, the intent, versus motive of what all of this means, and you can pick any cluster of dates and say this is significant.
And that's why combat rule of threes was so important, because we said not all of those are important. They're not all significant. This guy is eating with his left hand because he burned his iron on his right hand, not because it's a social message, right? So what you have to do is you have to take a step back and you have to say, these three things keep coming up in my environment. Are they significant? And then you say, no. One, it's random. Two, it's happenstance. But three keeps coming up. Now I take a look at it and I go, okay, there is a reason for this, because these folks know sun rises in the east and sets in the west. So this is the best place to put my plant in the morning. And if the water's too brackish, the plant is going to die. Why is that important? Thank you. Write that one down. But why is that important? Because March is important. And
Yeah.
if you plant at the wrong time, okay, we're back to Finland again, and your plants die because you get the first frost and you didn't have the little smudge pot up there, warming up your plants, then Brian, that might be the only seedlings you have. Why do we have a seed bank? And why is that
Yeah.
seed bank up, built into some place to keep? Because look, if we F around too much and make a mistake, we could all die. So the same goes right back to the breeding. It goes to the feeding. It goes to the marriage. It goes to the seven brides for seven brothers, not understanding that one of the most famous songs in that musical is about the rape of the Sabine women. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
To procreate a species, not being punitive, or we don't understand sometimes how simple the world really is,
Right.
and how absolutely obvious these warnings are. So when you talk about the chill in the air and the first frost and everything else, Brian, that's supposed to go to your brain.
Yep.
That's supposed to go to your
your
spine,
amygdala.
your
Yeah.
prehensile tail, and it's supposed to scare the shit out of you. So you go out there and start storing those things. My dad, for his entire life, couldn't eat smoked meat or salt cured meat. And I would always ask him, Dad, why is that?
He ate so much of
because
it.
he was shooting, he was shooting squirrels in our yard in Detroit. He was shooting bunnies out of the garden, and we would eat those son of a bitches. He would gig frogs, Brian. We'd eat them, but he wouldn't eat salt meat. Why? Because during the Depression, that's all they had.
That's all
and
I
when
had.
he was grown up, everything had to be smoked. Why? When you take a look at something like a recipe for jerk chicken, or you go to Saudi Arabia, where we've eaten some incredible meals, but like the dhub, you remember that little lizard thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You got to cook some shit a long time.
Yeah.
My dear friend Bob Sunderland, God rest his soul, when he would cook venison, and he goes, first put some vanilla in there. Then you got to put a lot of beer. Then you want some cayenne pepper and let it set for 3 weeks. Why?
Yeah.
Because it
'Cause it's
tasted so
shitty.
shitty and fetid that you had to do that. And we don't understand that. But
Yeah.
that's right back to so everything, our religion or choice of not, our planting seasons, the poems, Ring Around the Rosy, Pocket Full of Posy, has nothing to do with about posies. It has to do about the ashes that are falling down because we had to burn the bodies during the plague. So and there's another March. Spanish influenza came to the United States from Europe in March and started killing soldiers because they were the first ones that were exposed to it during the Spanish Civil War.
Yeah.
So think of that. And if that's the only thing you get on the news of your day at the reading wall, maybe that becomes how you break in the new year. Yeah, right? Okay,
No,
it's not the plant, it's the death. Ground's too hard to bury. So March is the burying month.
All right, so are you saying, 'cause I look at it as, don't go into, we get so wrapped around the detail of a specific belief structure when we don't look at the underlying tenets of, they're all the same. I mean,
They're
meaning
all
literally like
right.
they all
But
come
you're
from
gonna
something
everybody
deeper.
hates us now because you said that.
But
it's true.
It's deeper than psychology. It's deeper than neuroscience.
It's deeper than humans,
religion.
right?
It's deeper than paganism or atheism or Christianity or anything. Like it's deeper than that, because it's about survival. It's about it's survival at a cellular level for the entire species, and that's when we get into these periods of what the importance or the significance is. And so I want to be aware of that. And then now, will it start to become, will those dates start to coalesce on their own? Well, yeah, of course.
Yeah, they will.
I know from time in Afghanistan that, look, man, when March starts rolling around, that's when the Talibs start coming down from the mountain. They start cracking open up.
Where were they in the mountains? They weren't hiding in a cave. They were home.
Yeah.
They went home because they knew they couldn't fight. They knew they couldn't.
Over.
So I'll give you one Afghan story, and I'm not going to violate any sacred trust. So all of a sudden, in a helo, looking down at the road, you remember this, the road's snowy, the snow's deep, and all of a sudden, where they had dropped the ammunition crates of the Russian 7.62 by 39 and different ammo, the 54 down, the ammo's strewn about, and you can see the snow has moved. And the helo pilot is talking, and he looks at the guy and he says, "Hey, take a look down there. They abandoned the ammo. They must be withdrawing." And I'm looking at it and I'm going, the only thing that's missing down there is the wood from the crates. They took the wood for the fire because it was cold as shit. You can't eat anything with a 5.56. Do you get what I'm trying to say? And so what that pilot did is that Pilate created an alternative reality, and he doesn't understand that that resonated with the
That
scared people that were in the helo
well,
with
that
him,
it
and
tells you
became the
what's
truth of that village.
well, it tells you what's important to the people in that environment. The wood and
Exactly.
that ammo is more important to them than the ammo itself. That
They
tells you
never
where,
carried the
well,
flipping ammo afoot, Brian. Exactly.
that tells you what's important to them, right? That tells you
But
what they're going to
but do
use
you
it
see how
for.
that could have been an urban
Yeah,
legend? Do
yeah,
you see
yeah.
how that could have been the you don't understand, that's this? No, it's not. And I would say my third and final admonition for this episode is most things are exactly what you think they are. Okay, so
They really
sometimes
are.
reading too far into
They
something
are.
and trying to make the connection. That's why your favorite show about the American aliens or whatever that is.
The
Okay,
ancient aliens.
yeah, what do they always do? They always ask the question. So could it be that Stonehenge is really the landing strip
Well,
for a look? You could come 30 light years across
yeah,
space, but you have to lean two rocks together to,
yeah.
mark your space.
I,
Kiss my ass.
that's the
Yeah.
well, what I love about that show specifically is because they'll have some person on there who's some expert in whatever this thing is they're going to talk about from whatever PhD in
Yes.
university this person their whole life has been studying this, and they go very clinically like, all right, here's what we know, here's what we can prove, here's what we think it was used for, here's why we think that, here's the evidence to support that claim, and they go through it. It's awesome, so it's really cool. You'll get to learn about something, and then they
Yep.
they cut to the guy, and he goes, "But what if?"
The
It was
hair that's
him,
up
yeah,
here, and
and
he's
I
got
love
the
it.
puka
I
shell
laugh.
necklace.
I laugh every
Yeah.
time. I love it. I just because I love the story and I love
Yeah.
how people question that stuff and they want to create this, and
Yep.
the person's not being, he genuinely thinks that could be true. And good on him. Like they're not
Right.
being nefarious. He's not trying to sell me some product or something like that. He's just, coming with this alternative
But
belief. But
but
it
look
is,
at
I love
that.
it. I love it.
I do too, because it's suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
So you understand that the bread box and the cookie jar had a role. It kept the insect larvae off your food.
Yeah.
It kept it fresher
Fresher, longer.
longer.
Yeah.
But if you're a kid and you look at those two items, they're boxes intended to keep you
You
out.
out.
You get what I'm saying? So if you took that kid away and
I,
formed a society after that, and he wrote all the history of the society, look at how different a cookie jar would have been in his history,
No,
right?
I say it's funny. I still remember my grandma's like to me, it was like the heaviest thing on the face of the planet was the lid of that cookie jar. To me,
Yep.
I just still
And
remember like
the noisiest too,
it was so
because
loud.
you were sitting there, you wrapped towels around it to try to make sure that when you lifted it, and then all of a sudden that waft of the smell of the cookies came
Oh
through,
yeah,
and you're like,
yeah,
somebody's who's in the cookie jar, and you're like, how can
yeah.
they know?
So you'd get
But
these
think about it.
shortbread
If
ones, which I
that
wasn't even that huge for. They were so good I could smell the ginger ones, the ginger snaps that she
if
liked.
young
And yeah,
1990 Brian would
yeah,
have written our history, Brian, why do you think that I'm so careful not to take stuff off the internet? Because I'll leave stuff on the internet. We'll correct stuff on social media, but a lot of times we adopt something that is horse shit without doing the right amount of research, or we do too much conjecture, and now we've got a conspiracy theorist. And this day with humans nowadays, they would rather scan a headline and believe it than deep
yeah.
dive. I feel sometimes.
And that's with a lot of stories and a lot of things where people ask us, "Hey, how come you guys don't comment on this or comment on that?" And it's like,
Yeah,
that's not really the story. Like, there's deeper. They even some of the you see that a lot in politics or different what seem to be politics, which aren't even policy issues, with different cultural issues. And you're like, you're arguing about something. Why don't you just talk about what's really going on? Like, you're choosing this thing to get
as a
upset
metaphor for
about,
something else.
but
Right,
it's
right,
not
right.
really what you're upset about. Like,
No,
and that happens all the time, and it's unfortunate that people see things that way. But that's how humans are. That's why we're discussing this. And
exactly.
so I, it's we talk about how words matter and where these things come from, and it's why we use sometimes a seemingly odd lexicon, because it allows us to not fall into that trap, the cognitive trap, the language trap that we all do as
Exactly.
humans. You're going to do it to some extent anyway. We all have terms that we use that once you find out the history behind them, you're like, wow, I didn't know that. You know what I mean? Like, but
Exactly.
it didn't mean I meant anything by it. It just meant I was using a term that I learned and I thought it meant one thing, but turns out the history behind it is much worse. So you do have to be careful about that. And going back to this idea of beware the Ides of March, it's it's really just a beware of the historical significance of everything around you. I think.
Beware of serotonin. You could have said. You get what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say? I mean,
I
you could have said
wait, hang on,
beware
hang on.
of circadian rhythms, right?
Elaborate on the serotonin part. I know
So
circadian. I get what you're saying because it's the
more
change of the
light
seasons now. The
triggers more
time. Yeah,
serotonin.
yeah.
So I eat better. I sleep better.
I'm
I'm
happier.
getting more nutrition and I'm happier.
Yeah.
So we could put our face. Let me give you two off the cuff ones if I can. So the shaved ape. You would think that Eric Collier, who
The
I
shaved ape
love,
is a term for one of our good
Collier,
friends.
okay, greatest human ever, and he's so simple. So one day we were walking around in Indianapolis, waiting for a building to open where we were going to do training an hour and a half away at Muscatatuck, but we had to buy some gear because around Muscatatuck there was no stores.
Stores,
So
yeah.
he goes through, and as he's going through, he gets an eye patch and he puts it on. And he's wearing it through the business. And so I look at him and I go, "Do you know the significance of the eye patch?" He goes, "Yeah, it's National Talk Like a Pirate Day." Arr. And you know, Collier, it's
Yeah.
hilarious. I go, "Stop for a minute. Do you know why pirates wore eye patches?" And everybody out there that's listening to my question right now is going to come up with, "Yeah, you get shit in your eye and it's bad, and you know you got it cut out by some pirate with a hook." No, you wear the eye patch because you're going down into the hold where the ammunition and the sleeping area and the food is, and then you're coming up into the bright sunlight. So what you would do is you would cover one eye. So when you came up, you could switch the eye patch, and you wouldn't have your eye blown and be, you know, snow blind or light blind. And Collier knew the answer. And I sat back and I go, "Why does he know the answer?" Because he's a scout sniper, and it was imperative that he knew, or he could die. You see the difference? So
Right.
that's an important thing. So joking about International Talk Like a Pirate Day, leading you to understand that the eye patch was just a cop needs an eye patch if they're going to be chasing a suspect, and a suspect goes from outside, inside, and then to the basement, the unlit basement. Well, we have another thing. What's that equalizer? It's called a flashlight now.
Right.
But they didn't have the
They didn't have
flashlight,
it back
Brian.
then.
So again, whoever wrote that piece of history, if it was 1990s Brian again, it might be very different. So why did I bring up the shaved ape? Because the shaved ape knew of the significance because it was a matter of life and death. And whenever things, and that's March, whenever it's a matter of life and death, we take it more seriously.
If it's born out of necessity, right,
Yes,
then we are always
absolutely.
going to attribute significance to it because it's literally it's necessary for our survival, or you
Yep,
know, to innovate for future survival of all of us. No, and that's
spot on.
where this stuff comes from. And you know, I think there's you know, talking about this, there's a whole bunch of other things that are linked to what we're talking about, because I think this episode of Beware the Ides of March is going to be the first, and I think the next episode
Yeah,
should literally be, you know, April is the cruelest month kind of thing, right? Because
absolutely love it. Makes so much sense.
because Beware the Ides of March is big. We talk about the significant dates that happen in April all the time. You know, we've mentioned a few on here, and there's going to be a few more that we mention as
Yep,
well. But that they kind of lead into one another, right? And that
you're
becomes
exactly right. That's a great chain, Brian. Great chain.
that time. So I think this should be sort of like a two-part episode at a minimum to get into, okay, if I have to beware the Ides of March and everything we just talked about, well, we don't really have to, I just have to understand the significance behind it, then why is April the cruelest month? And I think that could be the next one, because you did mention
It's a great
some of those significant events, and so I think we could dive into deep on those. But what, you know, what do I need to take away from this episode, right? If we're saying, you know what I mean, after everything we just talked
bottom line
about,
it.
the
So
significance,
what?
what's the so what? What's the bottom line takeaway?
So let's do it with them. What's in it for me? So you and I have talked about an hour, and during that hour, every incident that we talked about was in March. The only thing that didn't fit the March incident is when we talked about the dog days of summer, and we gave an
Yeah,
explanation,
but
a comparative for July and August.
it was a comparative to Ides of March.
To balance that, right?
Yeah.
So now we're talking about March and why this part of our awakening is important. So I would tell you that you can go one of two ways, and I'm oversimplifying the shit out of it, but for a reason. So in March, the sarin gas attacked Tokyo subway.
Yeah. Shinrikyo,
Exactly.
yeah, I
You remember
them.
that?
Yeah.
Okay. So 12 died. 5,000 were injured. So I can choose to know that that happened in the next few days, and I can let that change how I approach life over the next few days in the subway and everything else. Or I can think about on the same exact day, at the same time that the attack happened, B.F. Skinner was born in 1904. And
Wow.
I'm a Skinnerite. I absolutely
Of
love
course.
our American psychologist, and
Yeah.
his behaviorism is the
Yeah.
fundamental underpinnings of a lot
Yeah, for
of what we do.
conditioning, for training,
So
especially. I mean, he
I
was.
can either think down, hey, it's Skinner month. You get what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say? Or I can think, hey, it's sarin gas attack month. And I'm telling you, life is that simple sometimes, Brian. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to let the wrong things coalesce and create my reality. I'm going to understand my life, and I'm going to write my own reality based on accurate time, place, data, calendar, dates, history, rather than just have the wind blew from the west this time. That doesn't happen. That means the UFOs are coming.
And I find you know, is it random or is it significant that you just brought up Skinner, but before we hopped on here, I talked about a 20-minute Simpsons recap thing that I saw with
Exactly.
Principal Skinner as one of the main
Exactly.
characters. So
But
is
think
that
about that. Yeah.
yeah.
So, but the string theory behind it is Skinner's behaviorism was a big part of the early Simpsons, because you remember Skinner had the Skinner box, the controlled environment, and on the Simpsons they had that wild scientist that had the box, and they were all sitting around and they could buzz each other, and so Bart and Lisa were just buzzing each other to make them shake, and they are all buzzing Homer just to make him laugh. So much of what we find funny is funny because of our history. It's funny because of our science, because of our understanding. And guess what? The other part of our deep, rich interest in comedy is from the stuff that scares us, that we don't understand. We
Yeah.
didn't understand for a long time where the sun went. So that was a large part of our religion back there. When the moon came out, we weren't sure what that. You were talking about it, the lunacy. Okay, lunatic. Those come from lunar. They talk about the moon. So sometimes, and just the last thing I want to hit on too, you brought up such a great point with the lexicon. I created Gregisms because I didn't know what things were. And so the word I came up with ended up having more significance and meaning to me until later in life that I found out there were actually already terms for some of those. But what do you think I used? Do you think I adopted the new term that I just learned? Or do you think that I used the
Right.
thing
You
that I've
stick
been
with,
using for
yeah.
60 years? So it doesn't make something wrong just because a person explains it differently than you do. If the core competency is right, then I give them credit for it. And what do we always say, Brian? Show your work. If you
Yeah.
can show me how you drew that reasonable conclusion and you can point to the artifacts and evidence, then you're right, even if you got the answer wrong. And what I mean by that is we don't rush to conclusions. We take a good long time to draw a conclusion. That's why we don't just get on and say, hey, hit play and talk shit. What we do is we
Yeah.
make sure we're talking about stuff that we have researched and known and lived
You
and seen.
well that comes with being, responsible with how you, distribute, disseminate information. And I
I
think
agree.
that's important, especially now, because everyone's confused as to what's real, what isn't, what's up, what's down. And we're going, look, just stick with what's been true throughout history and
Exactly.
throughout time. And that's likely to be continue to be true tomorrow. That's why, wow, all of
So
these
true.
cultures worship the sun. Well, if the one thing that you knew that the one thing that you could rely on, like I could always, that's the joke I make is, I know one thing, absolute true, has been true every single day of my life. That's the sun has risen in the east and it's set in the west. I
Right.
can prove that's happened every single day that I've been alive. So guess what? That's pretty damn important to me. More
You're
important,
exactly
that's the
right.
only thing that I can tell you has happened every single day of my life, right? So it just goes into what we attribute value to again.
You're
And I
exactly right.
think we hit on a lot on this March subject, so I'm
No, I
excited.
love it. So I'm anxious for April.
Yeah.
If we got this much out of March, wait, folks, because
wait till
April,
wait
a
till
lot more connections, I
wait
bet.
till you see April. No, this
How's that ambrosia, Brian? Exactly.
that is a deep Family Guy reference that I will not be repeating on this
Our
episode.
guests will be looking that up. I know.
um so That's I think that's a good sort of
Yeah.
spot to bring in for a landing. Again, well, this will be out next week, so I guess it'll be the 21st of March when everyone's listening to this. Hopefully, you listen to it when it releases. We have more coming, everyone, if you're listening. We do obviously as well have the Patreon site, so please check
Yeah.
that out. You're gonna have early access to stuff that we have coming up on the Arcadia side, on our business sort of side. But on here, if you're listening, one, we appreciate it. Two, please share it with your friends if you enjoyed the episode, and also reach out to us, leftofgreg@gmail.com. We get to people's questions. We love
Yes.
answering questions that people have. We love getting to topics that people want to hear us talk about. Again, I mentioned it briefly earlier. Sometimes we don't always cover everything right away, or we wait till something comes out, that kind of thing, because we see something in it where there's an ongoing, or there's going to be more to the story.
Precisely. And it's not that we're waiting to be secure in our prediction. What we're
It's
waiting for is the other shoe to fall, because
Yeah,
many times the journalists rush to get to be first, not to
right.
be most accurate. And Brian and I truly believe in being more accurate than being first.
Accuracy wins gunfights. I know that.
Hands down.
And I think quality is always better than quantity, and that's not always prevalent today. But if we stick to that sort of theme, you really can't go wrong. So
I agree.
so
I agree.
we'll continue to stick to that. So, any last words, Greg? I think that's a good
Yeah,
spot.
I would say this. I would say, folks, our McGraw-Hill textbook is
Yeah.
coming out soon. Start saving your money. It's going to cost about the same amount as your first car or your first house, but it's going to be
Not,
the origin. It's going to be the where everything started, and you're going to love it. But you may have to pay in installments, just
it,
like your college education.
it
Apparently,
won't be that expensive. It's just
I
we're
don't know.
we're limited in what we can do with the price.
Yeah,
So
because it's just us. Exactly.
yeah, well, that, and we have so much control over it, but we're getting that out very soon. So stay tuned, sign up to the website,
Yes, please.
reach out to us, and check out the Patreon side. Those folks on the Patreon side will have early access and
To
discounts.
everything.
So
To
yeah,
everything, and they get pictures. We send them and show them pictures that we
sometimes
don't
they
get.
don't want.
Exactly.
So,
We
all right.
contact them at their work.
Well, thank, thanks everyone for tuning in. We do appreciate it, and
We do.
don't forget that training changes behavior.